There you are. So how's things in your part of the world today? You see the unmute button?
Everything's good over here.
And welcome, Sean. Or is it Scene?
Hey, Sean.
Sean, good. Sean.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, cool.
So just take a minute and tell us who you are and where you are.
Hello, I'm Lindsay Erb, and I am in Moorfield, West Virginia. I'm a peer recovery coach for Potomac Highlands Guild.
Nice. Welcome.
Sean Yance. I'm in Ithaca, New York, and I'm a Serpa and Kark at Unity House of Cayuga here in Ithaca.
Nice. Okay. Well, thank y'all for being here. I'm delighted that you're able to join today. So I want to start with a quick little video, and it's only going to last about 4 minutes. Actually, we'll stop it at 4 minutes. And what I want you to pay attention to as this video displays is, so what word does the person use at the beginning of each validation that they use? And then secondly, what does he emphasize about each person when he does a validation? So let's just watch this quick video.
I'm here to get validated.
I can't see the video.
Can't hear it.
You
I see it.
Excuse me? You have an amazing face. You've got powerful.
Travis, any suggestions? They say they can't hear the video.
Yeah, I'm just going to move it over. I put it in the presenter area because I thought you were going to grab it, but no big deal.
Oh.
I got it. Here we go. We'll just start it over.
Ah, well. Yeah, okay.
Thanks, all.
Thanks for the feedback.
I'm here to get validated. You are awesome. Excuse me?
You have an amazing face. You've got powerful features, man. Anyone ever tell you that?
No.
Then listen. You look a little down. And it may seem like sometimes people don't understand you. But someday, man, someday, people are gonna see you for what you really are.
You really think so?
Absolutely. You are great.
Need a validation, please?
You are great, ma'am. You have amazing cheekbones.
Really?
Sir, yes. We have a situation. Where?
Oh my gosh. 6 months over.
What the hell's going on?
Yes, that is so sweet.
You've been through it. You know. You've had so much life experience that other people don't appreciate, but you know.
Plus you do.
They're not patronizing the shops. They're just coming to see him.
Oh, sir. You're in great shape. You work out?
Not for long.
I do, actually, a bit. Yeah, thanks.
Young man, we are running a business here, not a social club.
That is a fantastic suit. It really flatters you.
You think so?
You guys work so hard. You are the backbone that keeps this place running.
It always felt like no one really appreciated us.
Yeah, I mean, our jobs are so stressful, and it seems like most of the times people just don't see it.
No, what you do is so important.
You know, I bet the boss would love to meet you.
You are great. You provide hundreds of jobs, sustaining hundreds of families. That's huge.
That's so good to hear. Most times I feel like people don't recognize that. I'm just the big bad man on the hill.
Not at all. You give.
You know, I know some people who would probably like to meet you.
Mr. President, no matter what people say about you, you have still got a great golf swing. God bless you. You do. You have a fantastic mustache. I bet Burt Reynolds and Tom Selleck look at you and get envious. I'm not kidding.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hugh Newman, a man who is changing the world with free parking and free compliments.
New leaf. A very big new leaf.
Your license is expired, sir.
That is why you're great at what you do. You are so thorough.
Really? You think so?
Hugh, what is your secret?
I just love to see people smile.
It's
So, what'd you hear?
Each validation need started with
Yes.
you are.
Spot on. And so the distinction here is between sharing what we think other people about other people, and it's really talking about observed characteristics. So what gets emphasized in validations?
Things that are often overlooked.
Yeah, and it's really being able to focus in on what are the strengths of the individual. And it's not, I mean, it really is about what you see in the individual, what you see in their behavior. And the challenge often is kind of being able to see through those prejudices and biases and all that stuff that kind of filters what we pay attention to, and being able to pick out of all that, what are the strengths of the individual? What is there that's relevant about what that person is doing or has done? So the trick behind validations, which, by the way, I think is one of the most difficult things or relationship enhancement skills to do well, is to really be able to see through those biases and prejudices that screens out what we really pay attention to, and to build into our ability to see through some of that stuff that gets in our way. Good. So I'd like to invite you to just take a moment now and be silent and still. And I suggest beginning this minute by giving yourself an affirmation for the value and worth that you bring to our community is unique. There's nobody else who has the talents and the skills and the abilities that you have. And then secondly, in this minute, I suggest expressing gratitude to the elders who paved the way and made the life that you enjoy today possible. So maybe even go back to the First Nations people who took such good care of Mother Earth that we're able to enjoy the beauty and the bounty that exists all around us today. And in my case, I'm talking about it's the Muskogee or Creek or Cherokee or Seminoles, depending on which part of Georgia I'm particularly talking about, but it's different in your area. But express gratitude to those elders and those ancients, people who are still with you or who have passed on. So let's just take a moment to be silent and still. Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again, because a vision softly creeping left its seeds while I was sleeping, and the vision that was planted in my brain still remains within the sound of silence. Thank you. I don't know what came up for you in that last minute. I just expect something did. It always does for me. And I really like this quote from George Eliot, who said, if we had a keen vision of all that's ordinary in human life, it would be like hearing the grass grow or the squirrel's heart beat, and we should die of that roar, which is the other side of silence. So for me, the real challenge in doing this work well is to kind of become familiar with my other side of silence, to the point at which I don't think she meant die. I think she literally meant to become so familiar with it that we are able to tap into it and recognize the relevance of it in all situations. And it's about that other side of silence. That's that stuff that we filter everything that we experience through. And sometimes it's really an asset. Other times it kind of screams at us and says, oh no, danger, danger, run or freeze or fight or whatever. And so it's about this process of doing individual recovery support is really about becoming friends with that other side of silence. And the trick is, if I'm able to take that moment and ground myself in my other side of silence, in that thing we call soul or spirit, depending on what your faith tradition is, I think there's that peace that runs through all of us, through everything. And if it's in me, I believe it's in you. And if it's in you, then it's probably in the people that you're providing services to as well. So a simple way of describing this thing we call recovery support or peer support is, can we align our compasses? And it's not that we all have the exact same true north, but can I create a relationship with you in such a way that you feel comfortable telling me what your true north is? What's your next step? And be able to support me in my journey as I'm supporting you in yours. So if you would, hopefully everybody has the journal, but if not, if you can open up a web browser on your machine and go to responseware.com. Just type in responseware.com and it should take you a page that looks similar to what you see on the screen. Just enter as guest. You can hit that button. With session ID CARES, C-A-R-E-S. Did it work for you, Lindsay?
I got it, but I have it on my other computer. Do you need it on this one?
No, everybody. Everybody good? Not quite. Okay, so I just had to restart the poll. So it's open now. Have you attended a previous webinar with George Brott? Your answer choices are A, yes, B, no, or C, who the heck is George Brott? Such a catchy tune. All right. So 2/3 of us, yeah, not sure about who this guy is. Who am I? Well, picture of me from last week. Okay, yeah, most people laugh when I say that. Actually, that's a picture of me from 30 years ago, sitting at the desk of my first job in the behavioral health field. And I was a counselor at the Hodak Community Crisis Center. And I really thought I'd arrived. It was a great job, great organization. And, you know, like most of you, I got into this work because I just wanted to help people and kind of had a calling to do it, I guess you could say. And so my what really is, it's about promoting personal, professional, and community development. And I kind of took the traditional route, went to school and got a master's in psychology, beginning in physiological, and then after post-master's studied community psych. And then I'm an LPC and a professional counselor supervisor. I'm also a person who retired after 27 years of working in the criminal justice field with the Georgia Parole Board / Governor's Office of Transition Support and Reentry / Department of Community Supervision. And then I also have been fortunate to create the Certified Addiction Recovery Empowerment Specialist Academy, or CARES Academy, which is a peer recovery support training that is delivered in several states, including here in Georgia. And then more recently, a forensic peer mentor ready for reentry training. So I've kind of had one foot in the behavioral health field, one foot in criminal justice, and then one foot in peer services. And then you have to imagine me with 4 legs, because the other area of focus in my career has been recovery residences. My wife, and perhaps most importantly, I am a person in long-term recovery. And for me, 30 years ago, actually 31 as of yesterday. I got to get used to saying 31 now. Some people reached out to me and said, George, you're pretty good at what you do, but we think you can be better. And they provided me the support and the encouragement and the challenge that has enabled those things that have happened both in my personal life and my professional career to occur. And some of those people you see here on the screen. And so it really is about how we support each other. And so what I'd like to cover today is be able to introduce to you a way to have you introduce yourself to your peers by explaining this mutually beneficial and mutually supportive relationship as foundational to peer services, and be able to assess the quality of your first interactions with peers, and introduce the outcome rating scale and the relationship rating scale, and describe their relevance before administering either the online, the paper, or the oral forms of these documents. And then thirdly, also for you to be able to map information about your peers' lives in the 4 domains of the ORS, and assist the peer with tracking changes using the self-completed overview of recovery experience or scoreboard, or an app called Better Outcomes Now. Oh, I just realized there's a typo in that. So just get rid of that not number 3. And then number 4, participate in performance support that stimulates your immediately experienced and cumulative career growth. So immediately experienced means, are you able to reflect on your last interaction and get a sense of how valuable it was, what you did well as what could have been better? And who do you sit down with periodically to do that same sort of reflection and planning in terms of what you'll do differently in the future, to really be able to see that you're experiencing improvements, not just in your confidence, but in your competence as a peer recovery coach. So, second poll question. Did you complete the pre-session assignment? The answers are yes, no, or wait, what? I didn't know there was a pre-session assignment.
Go ahead, make my day.
Give you about 5 more seconds. Our survey says, nice. That was an even split. Okay. Well, if you were able to get the journal beforehand, there were specific instructions about several tasks for you to do. And one of those was to watch a video entitled, "For Clients, Get Better Results with PCOMs." If anybody watched it, I'd be really interested in what was your top takeaway from that brief video. James, jump in.
Morning. Yeah, for me, I took out of it that there's a lot of buy-in and empowering, not only of yourself, but of the persons that you interact with and work with, to have them be an active participant, and that to me is a different prescription, if you will.
Okay, so it's that empowerment piece in the driver's seat. Anybody else? What was your takeaway from the... I just realized I need to mute myself when others are talking. Well, so the whole premise of the Partners for Change is to put the peer or the person being served in the driver's seat, meaning it's their ideas, it's their resources, it's their goals that inform everything we do as peer recovery support service providers. And the trick here is to be able to separate our definition of recovery, meaning the one I have for me, from what that other person thinks their next steps are and where they're headed. And this is the fundamental difference between being a therapist or a counselor or a sponsor or somebody else. How do we develop a relationship with other people that empowers not just their ideas, but their resources? Instead of it being, I've got the answer to your problems, it's how can I support you and you support me in this journey we call recovery. Thanks for bringing that up, James. Appreciate that. So, what is this thing called peer support? I want to just introduce you to a definition that comes from Sherry Mead, who wrote a really, really significant book and developed this approach called intentional peer support. And she basically says peer support has three foundational components. The first of those is being able to provide mutual support. So I support you and you support me. It's not a one-way street, in other words. It's a two-way street. And there's really no wrong answers or statements. So as the service provider, your key question is, was it effective for promoting a mutually supportive and mutually challenging relationship? What is it, you ask? Well, it could be the last words that came out of your mouth in terms of, did it promote a mutually beneficial and mutually supportive relationship? It could be that same reflection in terms of your last interaction or session. And then, of course, you can back up from that and say, is my service or my program really working? Is it promoting mutually beneficial support and challenge? So the second aspect is this challenge notion. And so it's about stretching into mutually challenging relationships. It's not just me supporting you that gets me where I want to go. It's you supporting me. And so it really is more of an equal partnership. Now, it's not completely equal. It's never equal in the sense of you having a history with somebody, but you certainly are more on a level grounding with peers that you serve. And so the trick is, can you clarify what your peers said they need? And then express what you need, and then negotiate with measured judgment. And so the partners in relationships have to have the ability to say, here's what I need, and here are the boundaries around which I am willing to work within this relationship. And so it's about communicating in a way that encourages both you and the peer to step out of that current worldview and rewrite the temporary endings of your stories. And then third, she suggests that we practice intentionally not knowing, or what I refer to as pink. So I hear people all the time saying, oh, I like to meet people where they are and walk beside where the peer wants to go. Well, if that's the case, then it's about helping people figure out what is it I can do to support you. It's not saying I've got the solution to your problem, 90 and 90, and here's the place where you need to go. If that was your pathway, great, keep doing that for yourself. But somebody else may have some different ideas about it. And can you work equally well with somebody who says, already did 90 and 90, don't want to do that again, with the person who says, oh yeah, 90 and 90, that's exactly what I need to do? Can you work with the same devotion and compassion with the person who says yes versus the person who says no to your recovery pathway? Well, it really is about approaching the conversations, the interactions with others with curiosity and intuition and wonder. And that's what I refer to as pink. So practice intentionally not knowing, solicit feedback from the other person about how well this relationship is working. Practice intentionally not knowing, solicit feedback, pink, solicit feedback, pink, solicit feedback. Essentially, that's what a peer interaction consists of. And Sherry says, all you need is the ability to be challenged, to stick with the process, to express your needs while negotiating the needs of others. There are times when peers will ask you to do things that you don't want to do and that you shouldn't do. And then there may be times when you ask peers to do things that they don't want to do. And so it's about negotiating those differences. And of course, you can certainly celebrate when things are, in fact, moving forward and you're beginning to experience progress in the relationship. So I want to suggest this formula that behavior is always a function of interaction between people and environments. And it's the tendency is we get stuck on this notion of everything that causes a behavior is inside the person. Well, sometimes people do things because of the context that they're in. And it's about being able to see both sides of that formula as we have interactions with people and not saying, oh, the problem is inside the person. The problem very well could be in the environment. So it's first learn about who you're speaking with and explore their experience.
Hello, I'm Mr. Red.
Using pink Orsies. So it's practice intentionally not knowing. And that means essentially be curious. Even if you think you know, it's be curious about what the other person's experience is. So I want to do a real quick exercise here. If we could, let's see, James is clearing current communication, Tom Brady. You want to say more about that?
I think it was during an interview where he was talking about his relationship with his wife, and one of the things he mentioned is what makes them successful is to keep the communication clear and current, not going backwards and talking about what you did previously or, I never said this, but this bothered me, and it's 10 years ago. It's like keeping it clear and current. So I kind of, when you're talking about pink and you're talking about, negotiating the non-negotiables and setting up the boundaries, it's being clear, it's being current, and it's allowing each person to share their expectations and where we're willing to go.
Yeah, very nice. So the clearness and the focus on here and now really adds to the quality of the interactions. Well, so I want you to take a look at this exercise that's on the screen. It's the Recovery Coach role distinction exercise. I think I asked you to download this as part of the pre-session assignment. So out of those, well, actually, I think yours may have 12 items. Out of those items, which are within the scope of what a peer recovery coach does? Where would you put the letter B in those 11 items? Well, does a recovery coach conduct AA, NA, or other mutual help support group meetings? Well, actually, no, they don't. Now, you may, but not as a recovery coach, not as a CCAR certified recovery coach. You may do it as a sponsor. You may do it as an AA or an NA member. But it's recognizing that you're taking off the recovery coach hat and you're putting on the sponsor hat that's important here. Would you diagnose a substance use disorder as a recovery coach? I hope not. Would you provide pastoral counseling? I don't remember that in the CCAR Recovery Coach Academy. Would you do individual recovery check-ins? Yes, that's what we're talking about today. Would you facilitate a recovery group? Well, yes, that's part of what we do as peer recovery coaches. And so it's about providing individual and group services. And then all the rest of these things on this list, maybe except number 11, which would be an appropriate thing for recovery coaches to do. It's somebody else, or you're in a different role when you're doing 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And it's recognizing that, yeah, you may wear many hats. That's M-A-N-Y, not M-I-N-I. You may wear many hats, and it's fine to do that. But when you are doing recovery coaching, there's a set parameter around what the focus of those interactions are about. And our allegiances to particular pathways of recovery take a back seat to really being curious about what this other person's ideas are and where they see themselves headed and how they think they'll get there and what resources they already have that we can support them using to get to where they want to go. Therein lies the challenge. So, the correct answers are 4, 5, and 11 in terms of these are the designated tasks that recovery coaches will undertake. Comments or questions about any of that? Okay. So, next poll question, if you would go back to your web browser. Empathy, genuineness, and positive regard are necessary and sufficient for change to occur. Would you agree with that statement? Would you disagree with that statement? Or would you say, I'm not sure about that? Good. Our survey says Nice. So both of you agree. Well, in fact, Carl Rogers, back in 1957, published a paper in the Journal of Consulting Psychology where he identified empathy, genuineness, and positive regard as the necessary and sufficient conditions for therapeutic personality change. And Rogers' point was that that's all that people need in order to experience the conditions that lead to change. Now, I say all, but obviously those are difficult conditions to create in all interactions. And there'll be people that we meet that there's this instant sort of bond or this instant recognition of value and worth. And then there's others where, it's a lot more of a challenge to find what's good about this person. What are their strengths and their skills and their abilities? And it's that difference that's important for us to explore and understand. So lest you think this is some old white coot who has long since passed, a recent study by Michael Lambert in 2013, a meta-analysis, which means a study of studies, found that empathy, positive regard, and genuineness each were more powerful than any technique or model that was used by the individual. So whether we're talking cognitive behavioral, EDMR, MFT, all those different models and techniques are less relevant to outcomes than the person experiencing the sense of empathy, genuineness, and positive regard. So without getting into all the statistical background, 31, 27, and 24 are larger numbers than 20, which basically means empathy, genuine, and positive regard are the thing that most impact the quality of our relationships. I've got a note here saying that you lost me. Does that mean you can't hear me anymore? Can anybody hear me anymore? Okay, so James is saying you can hear me. Okay. Well, so this is not new stuff that we're talking about here. And the whole idea behind pink Orsies has been around for 60 years, essentially. And this is evidence-based. This is research-based. So it really begins with the assumption that recovery means different things to different people. And I describe it as, what's the core reason a person is coming to you for service? And they may not even be coming to you. They may just be showing up at a center or at a hospital or at a treatment program or at a day reporting center or many, many places. And so it's not that they're necessarily coming to see you. They're coming to get something, and you might just happen to be the person that they are running into. But the point is, what is their core reason? And by core, I mean what sort of craving or recurring experience is causing them to be challenged. And craving, most of us know what a craving is. It's when you almost get sucked into a feeling or a thought that recurs over and over and over. And that's why the second piece of core is a recurring experience. There's something that's bothering the individual. Either they want something that they don't have, or they want to get rid of something that they have. So what is that for each person that shows up? And it's about your ability to uncover what that core thing is. So I want to suggest that you structure your mind map about this other person in 4 general domains. So you know what mind maps are. So you create these, and for most people, they are some combination of visual and verbal content. So right now, you have formed a mind map of this guy who goes by the name of George Brott. And you have plugged into that mind map certain characteristics that stand out to you. So I'm male, I'm white, I'm whatever other details stand out about you. And so when you now think of this guy named George Brott, those ideas come into your mind. You may even see a picture of me. I'm kind of the funny-looking guy with hair all over his face that wears glasses, and that image is what pops into your mind, and then that leads you to the other characteristics. That's the mind map, and we do it for all sorts of things, not just people. But what I'm really emphasizing here is this notion of intentionally creating mind maps for each person that we provide services to. And the 4 domains that I suggest you really focus on is, number 1, what's going on in this person's life in terms of their individual health. You might call this intrapersonal, meaning within the individual. How's their physical and mental health? It can include all sorts of things. Are they eating well? Are they sleeping well? Are they having psychological challenges? Are there mental challenges? All of that can be wrapped up in this one domain of individual or interpersonal life. The second domain is interpersonal. This is the one that refers specifically to what's the quality of the relationships with the people who are closest to this individual. Many of us might use the term family to describe this inner circle of folks. Some people would not use the term family. They excluded their families long ago from their inner circle. But the point is, how are the most significant relationships or relationships with the most significant people going in your life? Then the third domain is socially. So most of us go to work, or we go to school, or we engage in some sort of volunteer activities in our community. So this is where we really can throw in the notion for me of fun. What do you do for fun? And then the fourth area is just overall, in terms of your general well-being. How do you think things have been going for you? And typically when people come in for some kind of a service, they're looking for a core experience that focuses on one or maybe even a combination of those domains. So the idea is, if we're having interactions with people, can we fill in those mind bubbles in each of those 4 domains and be curious about how's your physical and mental health? How's the quality of your most significant relationships? How are you spending time, either school, work, or doing things in your community that allows you to have the experience of accomplishment and fun? And then just fourth, overall, how's your well-being? And being able to fill in those details is a big part of what we should be curious about. So the way we do that is through what are called the relationship enhancement skills, what I call it anyway. Now, many of you will probably recognize these as something that you may first have learned from motivational interviewing. It's the same set of skills, just a different title to it. So fundamentally, it starts with practicing intentionally not knowing. Just because you went to Disney World and you got the t-shirt doesn't mean you know what somebody else's experience at Disney World was like. And so be curious about that is really the point. And how do you be curious? Well, by asking open-ended questions. And it's not inappropriate to ask closed-ended questions, but the typical best response, or the way to get the best response, is to ask open-ended questions. And you can certainly ask who, what, when, where, how, and why. Yeah, that's once you've got some rapport developed with another person, you can ask why, but typically why isn't necessarily a good thing to start with. So open-ended questions. Second is affirmations or validations. And again, this is a way of building feelings of empowerment and creating the person's sense of, I can do this, or what Albert Bandura calls self-efficacy. And so it really has to be about observed characteristics of the individual. And again, I'll suggest to you this is one of the most difficult relationship enhancement skills to do effectively. But with practice, you can get better at it. So that's the A. The R is reflections or paraphrases. This is simply a restatement of what the individual has either said or conveyed to you verbally and or non-verbally. And the difference between a reflection and a paraphrase, a reflection tends to focus on the emotional content of what a person is conveying, whereas a paraphrase focuses more on the cognitive aspects of what a person is conveying. And you can see there's many different types of those. And then the summary is an important key element because it's your way of kind of packaging up everything the person has said up to that point and handing it back to them and saying, am I understanding you? What did I leave out that's really important, that you think I need to be more informed about? And let's talk about that next. And so it's a useful way to move from topic to topic or domain to domain, but it's also vital at the end of interactions to say, here's what we've talked about. And I'm wondering if there's things that we talked about that you think are important to reemphasize here, and here are our next steps, or here are your next steps, and here's what I can do, it sounds like, to support you in doing those next steps. So at the end of interactions, tying it all together with a nice bow and saying, here's what we've talked about and here's what we're going to do next is a way to end the interaction so that it's productive. And then after that, the last, and this is intentional, in Pink Orsi is the I for information giving. So we don't merely start off with, oh, I've got the solution to your problem. Here, go here, go here, go there, do this, do that, because it's what worked for me. No, wait until you understand the frame of reference and the worldview of the individual, and you've explored their resources and what they think will work. And then maybe ask, well, I've got some experience with that. I'm wondering if you'd be interested in hearing what has worked for me or what has worked for other people. Then share that information, but not start there. That's where people make the biggest mistake in offering help and offering assistance before the person really understands where this other individual is headed. So that's why information giving is last. So let me pause here and see if there's any questions about these relationship enhancement skills. I don't see anything in chat. Thanks, James. Good. Thanks for the comment, Lindsay. So, if you remember those 4 domains, well, it just so happens those are exactly the same domains that are laid out in the outcome rating scale. And this is one of the documents that I ask you to download in the pre-session work. And what you'll see here is that the way the form works is the individual just thinks back over their last week, and they put marks on each of those 4 lines. So it starts with reflection. Think back over the last 7 days. How have things gone in terms of your personal well-being? How's your physical and mental health? Marks to the far left. Things can't get any worse. My life is awful. It's terrible. It's horrible. Terrible things have happened in the last week. Or to the far right, life is absolutely perfect. It's wonderful. It can't get any better. Where would you put a mark on that line in terms of your life? And then the same thing goes for interpersonal, social, and overall. It's a simple process. Now, what you should notice is there are no numbers on these forms, and that's intentional. And I won't get into all the background as to why, but this is a visual analog scale. And so people put marks on the line, then you take a ruler and you find out what number is closest to where they put the mark on the line. So you wind up with a 0 to 10 number, but you don't start there on the form. And you add all those four numbers up, and it gives you a score between 0 and 40. So the other form that I suggest you downloaded was the self-completed overview of recovery experience, and that is the scoreboard. And you can see there's a place on the scoreboard right here where you can show where the outcome rating scale score should go. So whatever those 4 numbers are that you added up to the total, that total would go right here in this box. In addition, this is where you would ask about the core, the craving or recurring experiences score. And then there's places where you can put that ORS score in this bottom section of the form that it gives you a way of tracking it over time. And that's why this becomes a scoreboard. Now, what's important about this is from the peer's perspective. This isn't your opinion. You have nothing to do with what numbers get assigned to anything that's on this piece of paper. It literally is 100% the individual's view of themselves and their life. And so it's a way of tracking over time what sort of progress they are actually making in their lives. So there is a document that I also suggested you download called the First Interaction Roles and Goals Self-Assessment and Feedback Form. And it's just a way of practicing how you introduce yourself to the peers that you're providing services to in a first interaction. Fact of the matter is, there's probably no more important interaction than the first one, because that's going to set the tone for, does that other person feel heard, understood, and respected enough to come back for a second interaction with you? And so the idea is very simply, you start off by introducing yourself and describing your role as a peer service provider. And what's the mission of your organization or the program that you're working for? And can you do that in under 2 minutes? Well, with some practice, yeah. And you have a routine already down. You already know how you introduce yourself. But does it include this notion of a mutually beneficial and mutually supportive peer relationship And does it include the mission of the organization for whom you're providing services? Those, to me, are the two essential elements of a good introduction. And then identify what are the peer or the client's hopes. And again, this kind of gets to the core issue. And then there's some additional steps. And I don't know that we necessarily need to go through all of this, but the idea is you build upon that introduction, how you introduce yourself, and it's vital to everything else that follows from it. So you administer the ORS, as we've talked about, identify what the person's resources are, discuss those allies' roles, and clarify confidentiality expectations. And then step 5 is describe your dual role as the peer client's ally and as a representative of the program, and what you hope to accomplish during this interaction. And then follow that up with what's the program's expectations, what guidelines do they have. Some programs call them rules. So what are the boundaries within which this relationship exists? And this doesn't necessarily have to be a long, drawn-out piece of the conversation, but it is important to say those things that are not negotiable. And then be intentional about summarizing the main things you've learned about the other person. And then the last part of this form allows you to actually sit back and reflect on what did I do well in this initial interaction. And there's a rating scale there that I suggest is a way of identifying what are some of the elements of it that I want to work on getting better at. Now, this is really a tool for you to practice with. It's not necessarily something that I suggest you take into an actual interaction with. It works much better if you pull a colleague aside and you do some practice interactions with them. Have the colleague role play being a peer, and you run through these steps. And once you get to the point of being able to go through all 7 of these steps, then you're ready to take it into your actual interactions with peers. And the key here is that once you've documented it, then you can sit down with your supervisor or the persons who provide you performance support and have conversations around what you did well, what you might do better in the future, and how you're going to improve on this skill set. And get feedback from your supervisor. So, the idea would be to just use this in role plays. And you can do it in a way that allows you to learn from the experience of both being a service provider and a service recipient. What's it like walking into your RC, your Recovery Community Organization, or the emergency department where you work, or wherever it is that you work? What's it like being a service recipient? And the key here is to pay attention to your gut. Pay attention to your internal reactions, both positive and negative. Can you feel good about what you do and what you say almost immediately upon meeting somebody for the first time? Or do you have that sort of sense that, yeah, this is a person that it's going to be a little bit more of a struggle for me to connect with? And the more you pay attention to that other side of silence, the more you're going to be able to manage it and learn how to more effectively interact with those people who either you have that, oh my gosh, this is my dream peer, this is the person that I know I can work with, not, or this is somebody that I'm appalled by. I have a gut visceral reaction that's almost disgust, and everything in between those two extremes. But recognizing where people fall on that intrinsic internal continuum is an important part of really being able to regulate behaviors in such a way that we're able to match and appreciate the other person's talents, skills, and abilities. So it's about this being flexible, and everybody has a routine, but within that routine, can you do things that actually accommodate the other person's worldview? Therein, again, lies the challenge. Ideally, if you record these interactions, you can learn a ton from those recordings. And there's a sample consent form that's included in your journal. So if you're doing this with actual service recipients, obviously you'll need to get a consent form signed. And it's just basically saying that they agree to be recorded and that you won't use the recording for anything other than your own professional development, and that you will maintain it in a completely confidential environment and not share it with anybody else other than perhaps your supervisor. And if it's you're sharing it with your supervisor, that needs to be stated in consent form as well. Now, I can tell you, after 40 years of teaching this, there are people who will say, oh my gosh, I can't do that. My peers will absolutely revolt. Well, no, not really. My experience is that if you're comfortable doing recordings, the people who are providing, who are receiving the services will also be comfortable with it. But a lot of that depends on how you present it. So, I agree, James. Silence is an important part of having the space for people to feel like they're valued in relationships. It's not just about filling up all of the space with your words. So then do a self-assessment, and again, that's what that form is for. Share that self-assessment in peer performance support groups and or with your supervisors, and solicit feed forward. And then repeat using the first interactions roles and goals self-assessment and feedback tool. So, I think actually, given the time restrictions, we're going to skip this one. So let me just go to here. So any questions about the way this whole first interaction process should work before we move on?
In thinking about how I approach, a lot of times when I read this material, and last night when I was going over it, it hit me that I just do this naturally and never really qualified it, if you would. And so it was kind of weird. So as I was printing stuff now, everything's out of order because I was trying to keep up. But one of the things that when I work with unsheltered or homeless communities, which I really don't like that, the uniqueness and skills that it takes to build a shelter, to provide food and clothing. It's hard for me to hear that person's homeless because they've made a home in their space. So it's a delicate conversation you have, but all of this stuff just flows naturally. So when you said mind mapping, when I read it, it was intimidating for me because as an adult learner, mind mapping just sounded foreign, dangerous, and I didn't want to ever try it. So, but you just made it small, and that kind of put me, well, it put me at ease. And I was anxious to hear how you were gonna go into it, and it does make it very comfortable to say, oh, I can do that with those 4 things. Yeah.
And so, I mean, and the mind map, I mean, it's we just inherently do it. it's nothing really new. I mean, kind of like these skill set. There's nothing new in the pink horses. We've done this all of our lives. It's just recognizing and making it a little more obvious. And so when I'm thinking about, and during interactions, when I'm thinking about what do I know about this other person, and I appreciate the fact that you see others as unique. What do I not know about them? What should I be curious about? So maybe they've told me all about their physical health problems, but maybe I haven't heard anything about who's their support system, or what do they do to have fun, or what are they good at, or what are their talents and their skills and their hobbies. And so the mind map is just a way for me to sort of check in with which of those 4 areas do I have some information about the person and which do I not have information about. And that leads me to ask questions in order to have a more full mind map about that individual. And I don't know if in your program you're expected to write progress notes or whatever you call them after interactions. That's you're pulling out of your mind map in order to write those notes. And by the way, one of the most handy things I've found is to ask the person receiving services to write the note. So what do you think was most significant about what we talked about today? Yeah, that's kind of radical. Well, so the other piece is on the right hand of the screen, you can see this relationship rating scale. And even though I've kind of held out talking about this to the very end, this is the most significant piece of the conversation if we're really interested in building effective relationships. Within the last 5 minutes of the interaction, pull out this form and say, similar to the outcome rating scale, I'd really like some feedback from you on what worked well today and what might make our next interaction better. And what you can see is, again, there's 4 domains. There's no numbers on this form. There's 4 lines, and you ask people to put a mark on each of those lines. Somewhere between did you feel heard, understood, and respected, or understood, respected, and validated, or not? Did we talk about and work on what you wanted to talk about and work on, or not? Did you feel supported and encouraged in your change efforts? Is this role a good fit? This role that I am in a good fit for you? And then overall, is this relationship good for you or not? And have the person do that rating, and then any scores that are less than 8s, be curious about what you might do differently in the next interaction to improve in that area. Now, again, this is the key part of the conversation. We're in the traditional clinical world, we're expecting our clients to change, and I'm using that language intentionally. We don't expect ourselves to change. And what this invites into the conversation is this idea of help me with feedback so that I can provide a better service for you. And so you're sharing both the responsibility for the interaction, but also for improvements so that over time your relationship can get better. And to me, this relationship rating scale is it's the icing on the cake. It's the cherry on top of the whipped cream. This is what gets us to where we want to go, because it sends the message loud and clear that if things aren't going well, I want to do something different so that I can provide you with the best possible services based upon what you think you need. So, here's a suggested text for introducing the ORS. I'm not going to go into this in any depth, but basically I like to start with the statement that I do things perhaps a little differently than what you're used to. And because I look the way I do, because of the way I talk, because of the way I might look like some previous service providers people have come into contact with, I like to set the expectation that I'm different from all those folks. And my peer services are a different service. If you've not been involved in peer services before, I don't say exactly this, but hold on, because it's about us having a mutually beneficial and mutually supportive relationship. And then talk about there's some tools that I've used that others have found useful for tracking progress over time, and then just jump into doing the ORS. So we'll have to skip this again, sorry. But the idea here really is to just be able to allow the time and the attention to shift to understanding that other individual and expecting they really do have the answers in addition to having the questions. And it's about me being able to align myself, hook my wagon up to their horse instead of the other way around. That to me is the fundamental difference between clinical services and peer services. So, what do you think? Questions are, what worked well? What could be better, and what are the improvement opportunities? And then what, if anything, would you do differently next time? And again, it's just a matter of intentionally stopping at the end of interactions and reflecting on this. And then if you're involved in supervision, this is the process of doing supervision. And if you have those recorded interactions, you can look at your interactions, go through that form and assess them, and then talk about these 3 questions. Pretty simple process. So, we've talked about introducing yourself. We've talked about the tools that are useful, including the ORS and the relationship rating scale. And now I want to stop and see what questions you may have.
Well, I'll ask a question. I'm in a unique situation because I have to create a position within my organization that fosters and nurtures what I'm seeing out on the front line versus in an organization that already has that vehicle in place. And the question is, how does one go about emphasizing the importance of this service delivery, not necessarily using the recovery coach model because that's accepted, but in terms of incorporating it into the definition of your job description to be more effective.
So you have an opportunity to create this new position, and kind of in writing the job description, you're thinking through, how do I frame this in such a way that the expectation is for people to get better at providing this service over time.
Yeah, and because you don't get support from within your own organization, whether it's through supervision, if it's understood that this is part of the role, we go through our own experiences, our own triggers when we're out there working with and providing services that sometimes without having an accepted role, it becomes, well, that's out of your scope of duties, but it still has to get done. And so you open yourself up to the trauma, those triggers again, and it's sometimes it can be hard without that support system.
Sure. So part of what I find most valuable, particularly about PCOMs, but also the Partners for Change Outcome Management System, but also the performance support process, is that these decisions about the quality of a person's job can be informed by the data that's provided by the service recipients. And so, how do you garner support? It's about being able to show that you're actually improving both the quality and the outcomes of the services you're providing. So, just to give you an example, you probably have some sort of a monthly report. And on that monthly report, there's items like how many people you've got on your caseload or your peer load, whatever term you use, how many new people came into the program, how many people left the program. And if you track that over time and you start making changes to your service delivery model, what you may find is that if you track things like length of stay, what you'll see is that you can, in fact, intentionally impact how long a person stays in the program. And if the goal is to get people out as quickly as possible, you might track how that decreases over time. Or if the goal is to have people engaged longer, if you track what matters to the program, then you can show using the data whatever changes you're making within the program, what impact that's having on those key outcomes, those key metrics. So just a suggestion. So let's do a quick AAA checkout, I like to call it. This doesn't have anything to do with the travel agency, but it's about, tell me one thing you liked about today, something you appreciated about today's webinar, or maybe there was an aha that stands out, something you learned, or maybe what is something you anticipate doing following this webinar. And yeah, you're free to come on and tell me.
Yeah, I don't know. Again, reading it last night, I was looking forward. I kind of got freaked out because I was having logging issues, but validated. I'm a first responder, and while we've embraced the CCAR model, working with knock and talk with places that the fire department responds to where there are overdoses, we'll go back to the homes and try to reach the individuals and just talk to them and see, provide support if they need it, and reach out. But, what I do different is, and as you said, we're unique in our approach. Although I'm a code enforcement official, we don't believe code enforcement is the primary tool. We believe in approaching the violations and approaching the unsafe conditions with compassion and empathy and an understanding that it may take 6 months to even get buy-in on one idea of divesting of treasures that have taken decades to accumulate. So just reading this, I'm going to have to download it again and put it on my tablet because this is all ruined. But it just was a validation, and I don't it's encouraging me. I already have my job description, and I'm going to keep pushing forward because I just think that right now there's a huge gap with our elderly and comorbidity, and undiagnosed hoarding conditions, and I'm hitting myself up against a brick wall. Um, but we're seeing it, as you said, documenting it. We're documenting it. Our fires are, severe fire load, quote unquote. We don't want to say they're hoarders because they're not diagnosed and we're not clinicians, but
Yeah.
it is heavy clutter. It's yeah, we've only had 2 people in the 2 years that I've been doing it refuse help, but we've seen people transform, and they've been amazing. And it's a 6 month window is what we're kind of using, because that's when we begin to see the leaving bags out of trash and not bringing them in. So it's empowering, it's validating, and I just think this was amazing. I wish it was. I think it should be longer. I think it should be. Um, I think it should be longer. I think it should be longer.
Well, it's amazing work you're doing, and it's quite significant, and
Yeah.
you're touching people's lives in ways that they didn't expect, and your community probably didn't expect. But good work. Lindsay, anything you'd like to add?
Um, I like the validation also, and because I do validation, but maybe not so much for the simple things. It's kind of something bigger whenever I do it. So I'm going to start working on validation just as telling people how awesome they are and stuff like that. But I also like the part when you were talking about how we help them, because I'm all about helping them, but sometimes, like maybe put myself on their level and then them also helping me at the same time.
There you go. It's a two-way street. Well, thank you.
Yes.
And I appreciate that you kind of have a knack for doing validations, and it really is sometimes the simple things, or the less grand things. A person shows up on time for an appointment. That can be a big deal. So I would appreciate it if you would fill out one of the CCAR feedback forms. Tell me what would make this webinar better the next time I do it. And just real quickly, if you probably have already gone through this, but there is a license agreement you have to sign in order to download the PCOMS forms. It just basically says you agree not to change any of the documents. And then you put your email address in, and you can see that the forms are available in 31 languages now. And then down there at the bottom are the peer services forms. So the others are for clinicians, which that's okay, they can use them too. And the English version is under the British flag, not the American flag, but they're still all written in English. And then just want to leave you with this idea. I know it's tough sometimes working in this field. Some days you feel like the crane, others you feel like the frog, but the point really is just don't give up. And I'll leave you with this quote from St. Francis of Assisi, who said, "Start by doing what's necessary, then do what's possible, and then suddenly you may find yourself doing the impossible." So with that, I appreciate again your time and your attention and your contributions today. And I hope you'll spread the word, invite your friends to join us next month for the follow-up webinar with CCAR. Hope y'all have a great rest of your day.
Thank you for everything.
You're more than welcome.
Thank you for